One of the strangest rites of passage for the modern seeker is the slow, stubborn shrinking of your social map while the interior map expands. At first, it feels like a small fit, an odd comment at a family dinner, a pause that no one else notices, a joke that no longer lands. And then, quietly, the room grows unfamiliar. You wake up one morning and find yourself a caterpillar that has been reading about wings. The world is the same, the leaves are the same, but something inside is moving toward a shape that no longer fits the routine. That movement asks for two things at once: to stay in the world you promised, and to become someone the world does not yet recognize. If you find this helpful, stay with me until the end. And if this message lands, consider subscribing and liking so others who feel this pull can find it too. You are not wrong. The map that guided you, language, priorities, jokes, loyalties, was built for a different edition of you. As your attention loosens its habitual grip, the grammar of conversation shifts. The marketplace speaks in utility, ambition, reassurance. The mystic listens for silence, for the unspoken rhythm under the words. These are two languages often spoken at the same table. You will learn to recognize when you are translating your inner discoveries into the marketplace dialect, or when you are silencing those discoveries to preserve peace. That choice creates the double life, a dangerous half-truth that erodes trust with yourself. Krishnamurti used the phrase choiceless awareness to gesture at a quality of attention that does not pick, categorize, or defend. It is not a technique, but a posture. To watch what arises without the immediate overlay of judgment or agenda. In that posture, something curious happens. Thought, which is time-bound and utilitarian, begins to show its limits. Thought names, compares, plans, and survives by memory. But when attention meets a clarity that is not conjured by memory, thought has fewer maps to offer. The stopping of thought is not a violent interruption. It is a natural consequence of thorough seeing. Like a lobster whose carapace has become too small, you must shed an old shell to breathe differently. The shell does not vanish in shame. It peels away in stages, sometimes painfully, sometimes with relief, always with exposure. Let me be clear about language here. When I say thought must stop, I do not mean annihilate your capacity to reason, to pay bills, or to love. Thought functions. It is necessary. The paradox is that the very mechanism that creates your sense of continuity, memory, and narrative thought cannot see itself fully while it is busy sustaining the self it seeks to preserve. Choiceless awareness is the mirror in which thought sees itself, and seeing without defending dissolves the urge to perform and protect. That dissolution opens a space where insight may arise that is not the product of linear thinking.
You will feel this most acutely during the dark night. Not a theatrical punishment, but a necessary limbo where lightless clarity is earned. People describe it as loneliness, despair, numbness, or a curious freedom. During those weeks or months, you may notice life's colors muted, conversations thin, and your habitual comforts failing to soothe. Friends who were once quick to understand will offer explanations that miss the point. It's a phase. You need to be patient, or have you tried X? These responses are tender but insufficient. They are the marketplace tending to a wound that requires a different medicine. What to do in the dark night, then? First, do not mistake withdrawal for avoidance. Solitude becomes a teacher when it is chosen with responsibility. Maintain the rhythms that hold your practical life together: payments, work, promises to others. Do not create chaos in the outer world under the guise of inner truth. Authenticity is not dramatic abandonment. It is the steady alignment of your outer actions with your inward clarity. In practice, this means small, honest conversations. A spouse told simply, a parent reassured, a colleague informed when your capacity shifts. Speak less to convince and more to be clear about boundaries and needs. At the same time, cultivate practices that stabilize attention. Sitting quietly for even 10 minutes a day is a laboratory where choiceless awareness can be refined. Not as self-improvement, but as a fidelity to observing. Notice the quality of attention. Is it grasping, planning, defending, seeking? When you train the body to sit, the nervous system learns a new tempo. You will be less likely to collapse into compulsive explanation in social settings. Breath, gentle noticing of sensations, short walks without devices, and the discipline of saying, "I'm reflecting," instead of rushing to explain. These are gestures that protect the tender interior without building walls. Beware, too, of a different trap, spiritual ego. When your perception opens, the temptation to brandish insight as moral superiority can be fierce. You may find yourself thinking, "I see through this," or "they are asleep." That stance fractures relationships and hardens the very I you are attempting to dissolve. Humility is not an affectation, it is a practical necessity for growth. Test your humility by how you respond when someone misunderstands you, or when your closest friend ridicules what you find sacred. If you retreat into contempt, you have traded one shell for another, albeit a shinier one. There are moments when the passage feels catalytic. A ceremony, a breathwork session, a spontaneous glimpse while washing dishes. Psychedelics appear in many modern narratives as accelerants of opening. They are part of the landscape for some seekers, and I mention them because they can be catalysts for seeing patterns. However, they are not a shortcut to choiceless awareness.
If you have such experiences, treat them with caution. Integrate with a grounded community. Maintain ethical responsibility for family and work, and avoid using these events to justify rifts. The inner truth they reveal must be embodied slowly, as character is built slowly. You will face social consequences. People who once loved you for the role you played may distance themselves. Sometimes the distancing is gentle, fewer invitations, a cautious tone. Other times it is sharp, hostility, suspicion, the muting of affection. Remember that most reactions are not personal rejections, but ripples caused by uncertainty. Your change threatens the comfortable map of others. That does not make their reaction right or wrong, it makes it human. Meet those reactions with clarity. Allow grief when a relationship thins. Practice boundary when contact becomes draining, and keep a soft openness to reconnection. Many relationships can adapt if you communicate honestly and consistently over time. There are practical strategies for staying humane in this shift. Keep one or two trusted interlocutors who are willing to hold your process without needing you to be the same person you once were. Practice explaining less and listening more. You will be surprised how much heart is reached by simply attending. Create new rituals that honor your interior life. A weekly walk with no agenda, a notebook for observations, a meal prepared as an offering to yourself. Serve someone in a small, mundane way to stay humble. There is nothing more grounding than the repetition of common kindness. Climax arrives often unexpectedly, a clear statement to yourself that you cannot go back to the old compromises. It might be a decision at a dinner, a silent moment in the car where you say, "I will not lie to myself anymore," or a sudden recognition that the old jokes no longer land. In that instant, the cost of the double life becomes intolerable. The danger here is binary thinking. If I leave, I will lose everything. If I stay, I will lose myself. The middle way, the ethical path that honors both responsibility and truth, is where most of the work lies. Choose decisions that minimize harm while maximizing fidelity to what you see. This is the art of shedding like the lobster. It takes stages. You do not break all forms overnight. You renegotiate obligations, disclose parts of your interior gradually, and allow new affiliations to form organically. New community may appear in unlikely places. A class that meets once a month, a neighbor who shares poems, a small group that values silence. When you find resonance, move slowly. Authentic community is not a mirror to your insight, but a field where honesty can be tested and matured. There is a further paradox worth naming. The treasure you seek, an authentic life, clear seeing, compassionate freedom, often becomes the means by which others awaken. But this cannot be manufactured.
The way you live the ordinary tasks with integrity, the way you choose to speak less and act more, will, over time, be persuasive. People are moved more by presence than by argument. This is why choiceless awareness is not a show of virtue. It is a way of being that quietly alters the density of relationships. Along the way, practice small, actionable ethics. Keep promises, especially to those who depend on you. Do not abandon responsibilities because feeling different is uncomfortable. Pay attention to your mood. When you notice bitterness, that is a signal to check your motivation. When curiosity wins over judgment, you are learning. When you are tempted to demonstrate your insight, pause. Demonstration is often a defense. Cultivate gratitude for the small elements that keep you human. The taste of coffee, a hand on your shoulder, a friend's laugh. These are not distractions, but anchors. Finally, trust is not a slogan, it is a muscle. Trust the process by trusting your capacity to be steady while you change. Trust does not guarantee ease. The dark night will still come, but it will be traversed with less panic when you have cultivated practices and allies. There will be moments of intense clarity that feel like a door opening. You will see the seamlessness beneath the separations, the way life moves without asking your consent. In those moments, thought will stop, not because it is suppressed, but because it has nothing left to defend. The silence that follows is not an absence, but a different kind of knowledge, a clear, luminous attention that neither clings nor rejects. If this teaching echoes, consider this a practical invitation rather than an abstraction. Begin with one commitment, 10 minutes a day of non-reactive attention. Speak honestly to one person this week about what is shifting, not to convert them, but to practice truth-telling. Keep one responsibility you cannot or will not abandon. This will be your test of integrity. And when the loneliness tightens, remember that loneliness is often the corridor to community. It prepares you to recognize resonance you could not have seen before. You asked why thought must stop, and the answer is simple and strange. Thought must stop because thought survives by maintaining separation. When seeing becomes total, the imperative to survive as a separate self dissolves. That dissolution is not annihilation, but a reconstitution into a wider intelligence that moves through you. The butterfly is not less than the caterpillar. It is a different expression, capable of a different relationship to the world. Your shedding will be witnessed by some and missed by others. Honor both experiences. Live honestly in the marketplace and the mystic field simultaneously, with the humility to learn from both. There will come a season, perhaps quietly, when you notice that your speech has a slightly different weight, that people listen not because you are clever, but because you are present. That is the fruit of a long practice. You will find new companions who share the hunger without needing you to explain every nuance. You will also find that some old attachments return, now altered, or that new ones form that surprise you. The final counsel is the simplest. Be patient with your own evolution. Be accountable in your duties, and be courageous in small acts of truth. Trust the process, and let thought rest when it has served its purpose. You are not alone in this passage. Many have walked it and returned to tend the bridge for others. If you have a reflection or a small story of a time when attention changed everything for you, share it with someone who might need that reassurance. If this message helped, consider subscribing and sharing with a friend who feels adrift. Above all, practice the small fidelity of showing up for yourself each day, and let the rest unfold. There will be setbacks. The momentary collapse of a habit is not a failure, but a voice telling you where the habit is weak. Notice without accusation. Name the condition, tiredness, hunger, anxiety, a needless comparison, and address the condition first. Repair is practical. Cut back on obligations for a week, sleep with intention, permit sorrow to run its course. When you treat relapse as data rather than indictment, you build information into your practice. Curiosity replaces shame, and a curious mind is more resourceful. Cultivate honest accountability that is neither punitive nor theatrical. Choose 1 or 2 people who can hold your steadiness, not to manage you, but to witness the slow fidelity of your life. These companions need not be mystical. They can be a friend who remembers your promises, a partner who tolerates your silences, a neighbor who drops off soup. Their task is simple: to remind you of what you said you would do and to accept you when you cannot. Presence, again, matters more than proclamation. Learn to do hard things in small pieces. Break fear into micro steps. 1 minute of attention, 1 truthful sentence to a colleague, 1 act of reparation to a family member. Victory compounds when it is small and steady. Build scaffolding, rituals that anchor your day. A simple evening question can transform the quality of your mornings. 2 minutes at night asking, "What did I carry well today? Where did I leave something undone?" And then a breath, a decision about 1 small thing to try differently tomorrow. When work demands everything, remember that creative labor is a kind of devotion. Protect a thin margin of time as if it were holy. Even 15 minutes of unscheduled attention to a craft, a conversation, a body becomes a reserve from which patience and imagination are drawn. The world will insist on urgency. You must insist on rhythm. Rhythm is not laziness. It is the architecture of sustainable presence. Grief will arrive without permission. Do not rush it. Give it a space that is not merely functional but ceremonial. A written note left by a window, a walk without destination, a slow meal taken with awareness. These small rites do something that words alone cannot. They honor the body's truth and allow the mind to integrate loss into story rather than trauma. Speak less about ideas you're still forming. There is power in incubation. Commitments spoken too early attract premature resistance and misaligned counsel. Let some discoveries gestate in private until they have weight. When you eventually speak, your voice will carry the lightness of clarity rather than the puff of novelty. Teach by showing. If you lead others, do the tasks you ask them to do. If you preach courage, be seen making a humble, risky choice. If you teach patience, be present in the tedious moments. Leadership that rests in example is less fragile because it is embodied. It invites imitation, not compliance. Finally, learn to celebrate the ordinary. When you begin to notice the small true things, the sound of rain on a roof, the steadiness of a hand holding a mug, a child's unguarded joy, you are building an interior archive that can be consulted in winter. These memories are not distractions. They are the scaffolds you climb when the sky is heavy. Later that morning, you sit at the kitchen table. The light slants, an ordinary geometry that knows how to solve itself. You breathe once, twice, and the world seems to make room. A neighbor's laugh carries through the thin wall. A dog barks, brief and certain. You pick up your cup, and for the span of its warmth, attention is simple and undivided. This small act, attending to the cup, to the breath, to the day, reaffirms the larger promise.
Not to become someone else overnight, but to arrive where you already are with steadier hands. And so you continue, one small fidelity at a time.